Here is a rather dramatic story, a family secret that had been carefully kept from me while I was growing up, and indeed until 1991. In 1991, during our visit to Edmonton and surrounding areas, we visited Margaret and Frank Degenhardt, August Schiller, who had flown up from New Westminster to see us, and Kathy was there as she had driven us out from Saskatchewan. We were discussing a family secret which had recently become known, that Jeanette Vogel had been pregnant with her cousin Jerry Pingert's baby at the time Jerry accidentally drowned in a dugout on her dad's farm, and that she had been taken to a home in Regina or Moose Jaw, where her baby was born and was given up for adoption. This baby grew up, married, and had 2 children. She recently found her birth mother and came to see her in Weyburn, where she was welcomed by Jeanette and many of her relatives. Of course, the entire story was now known, and we all agreed that it really wasn't a good idea to try to hide family secrets. August remarked that there was another family secret he had often wanted to talk about, but didn't know if he should. After some back-and-forth discussion, I became aware that it had to do with me, and that they all knew about it. I encouraged him to go ahead and tell me, and finally Margaret said, "Well, we believe you are our half-sister." I was astonished and asked for details, which they supplied. Here is their story. When my mother, Minnie, and Philip Byerly fell in love, her father refused to allow them to marry. Philip had a crippled hand, and Kathy supposes that may have been why. I surmise it may have been because Philip was the hired man and had no prospects. At any rate, Minnie was sent to Matilda and Joe Schiller's to help, since Matilda was due to deliver her 4th child. August was her first, and then she had lost 2 babies before that pregnancy. When the baby Margaret was born, she was sickly, and Minnie stayed there for some months. No one can say how long. When Minnie came home, she was found to be pregnant by Joe Schiller. I was later told by Sue Krimenacher Chambers, who had been a good friend of Minnie, that when Minnie's mother found out, she said in German, "Oh, child, I would rather have seen you dead than bring this news to me." And Sue said, when Minnie died only 3 months after her baby was born, her mother mourned so greatly because she felt it was a judgment upon her for having said those words. Obviously, Minnie's father must have then agreed to allow Philip to marry Minnie. Several people have told me that he loved my mother very much, and certainly he must have done so. There must have been a great effort by the Vogel family to suppress the facts, but apparently the true facts of my parentage must have been known by some people in the neighborhood. Sue Chambers has known it all these years. Her parents were good friends of my grandparents, and Sue, although older, was a good friend of my mother and loved her very dearly. Amazingly, when I was married and living in Burnaby, we often visited Sue and her family in Abbotsford, and we felt very close to them. But Sue never told me the facts of my parentage until they became known to me, and I asked her for the truth. Sue remembers that there was a quiet family wedding. Kathy, too, remembers a dinner with Minnie sitting at the table in a gray dress. Another memory Kathy has is that after Minnie died, Mother washed her and dressed her in that same gray dress and laid her out in the brown room of our house on the farm. Philip brought her rings and asked Mother to put them on Minnie. Mother objected at first, but he insisted, and she did put them on Minnie's finger. We surmise that Minnie was not wearing her rings because her fingers were swollen because of her illness. Kathy remembers being in bed, Minnie being in bed most of the time after I was born. August remembers when visiting once, Minnie was sitting up in bed with a lace cap on, which is like the picture he had previously given me of my mother, which he says hung in his parents' home. August had taken the picture off the wall after his mother died and took it back to Vancouver and kept it. When Dorman and I visited August and Betty in 1987, August gave me the picture. He says he wanted to tell me the story at that time, but hesitated to do so, so he didn't. Joe and Carrie Schiller say they got the story from his dad's last wife, who years before had been a neighbor of Matilda and Joe's when they lived in Ceylon. Carrie asked her how she knew this, and she replied, "Matilda hat mir gesagt." Matilda told me. Joe said this substantiated rumors he had heard previously. However, none of the Schillers ever asked their dad about it while he was alive, and now they regret having done so. So this is the story. It really is incredible to me, looking back now, that I had no inkling of it in my growing up years or later. I think I must have been terribly unaware or naive, for apparently there must have been talk around McTaggart at the time and later. Wilfred Schiller tells me now that he heard the story from several of the old ladies around McTaggart when he was a young man, and he had talked about it with some of his brothers and sisters at various times. I do remember when I was a teenager questioning Mother about dates, and that she was distressed and did not want to give me clear answers. I came to the conclusion that my real mother was pregnant before she was married, but that was all the information I gleaned. I also remember as a child watching Mother doing such tasks as kneading bread dough, with the tears dripping down while I would be prattling as children do. I remember her sadness and thought that it was due to my mother's death and tried to cheer her up. Kathy, too, remembers Mother's sadness and that she cried a lot. The subject of what my mother died of came up. I remember some talk of her not having been diagnosed correctly. August and Margaret say they were told she died of milk fever. This sounds logical, for I remember Mother telling me she had to bottle feed me from the beginning, and how hard it was to find the right formula, which is why I was such a crying baby. Looking back, I do realize that I was always aware of a sort of family feud between our family and Joe Byerly, my Philip Daddy's brother. My Philip Daddy was buried beside my mother. A beautiful marble tombstone had been erected over her grave, with her picture enclosed in a glass case on it, and is still in perfect condition to this day. A white wooden cross with simple lettering on it had marked Philip's grave. Sometime after his death, Joe Byerly engaged an engraver to engrave his name and dates underneath my mother's on the tombstone. The engraver made mistakes in the spelling of his name and also the dates. I somehow got the idea that the feud was over this. When I turned 21, I was contacted by a lawyer in Weyburn who told me I was the beneficiary of a small $2,000 insurance policy of Philip Byerly. He had not changed the beneficiary on the policy, and the Byerly clan believed the insurance money should come to them, while my grandfather Vogel insisted it should be mine. Joe Byerly refused to sign off on it, and the policy just stayed in the lawyer's office all those years. The money was never invested, so it didn't increase in value, and some of it was eaten away in lawyers' fees. Looking back, I realize now that Joe Byerly refused to sign off on the policy because he believed I was not Philip's legitimate child. However, this was not explained to me at the time. When Margaret and I talked privately, we agreed that we should not judge or blame. These things happen, she said. That is all that needs to be said. I must say that rather than being upset, I am delighted to find I have this large family of half-sisters and half-brothers. And it is wonderful that most of them now accept me as a half-sister. Margaret and Joe visited us in 1992. Johanna and Bill have been to see us many times. Nick and Adele have visited us, and so has Mike. Wilfred and Joe phone often. My children are pleased to have this large extended family and glad to get to know some of them. Addendum. I wrote the above story some time after our last visit to Canada. When I got serious about doing a Vogel family history book, some of the relatives began to question whether the story was true, and the possibility of DNA testing came up. Brian Schiller contacted a lab that does DNA testing, and it was arranged. Cheek swabs were collected from me and 4 of the Schiller siblings. The genetic test report says, the probability that all 5 children share the same father is 99.8%. The results are based upon the supposition that Margaret, Matilda, Mike, and Johanna are full siblings of their mother, and their mother is a full sibling to the mother. Are full siblings, and their mother is a full sibling to the mother of Amelia. I said that badly.
I can edit it.
Okay. Or should I repeat it?
Repeat the whole thing.
The probability that all 5 children share the same father is 99.8%. The results are based upon the supposition that Margaret, Matilda, Mike, and Johanna are full siblings, and their mother is a full sibling to the mother of Amelia.